The book of Daniel is about a particular time in the history of the world, a time which Jesus calls the times of the Gentiles. Check this out. Come with me to the Gospels. Luke 21. Now, Jesus says that Jerusalem will fall by the edge of the sword. It will be led captive away among the nations and be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles. But all of this is only going to take place for a limited amount of time, a particular window. Um, and it will stop, it will take place until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. When those times are fulfilled, then this will no longer take place. Well, this period, the times of the Gentiles, this is what Daniel is interested in, and his focus is on the beginning of this period, the stories of Daniel and his friends in Babylon, and the end of this period, the coming of the Antichrist and his short reign. But more on that next lecture. These stories of Daniel and his friends in Babylon, they are designed to give hope in the future coming kingdom of the Messiah over all nations, but also to inspire hope in the present sovereignty of Yahweh now over the nations of the world. And they also are designed to teach the exiles how we are to live in this world, both giving us a warning about what life will be like during the times of the Gentiles, and also how we can respond to that. Now, both of these things, both of these themes and purposes are present in Daniel chapter 1. Now, the hope in this chapter is a little bit subtle, but it's there. Come with me to chapter 1 of Daniel. All right, Daniel chapter 1. So we read this last lecture. During the reign of Jehoiakim, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it, and they took away all of the temple vessels and a whole bunch of the people. Well, why was Babylon successful against Jerusalem? Was it because of Babylon's great power and the strength of their god Marduk? No, it wasn't. Babylon was successful against Jerusalem because the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand. Now, what does that mean? If Yahweh was sovereign over Judah's exile, well, then he will be sovereign over their return from exile as well, as promised in the prophets. Well, until then, how is Israel supposed to live during this time of the Gentiles when they're scattered among the nations? Well, Daniel is going to warn of two forms of persecution during this period. One, Jews are going to be forced, or they're going to attempt to force Jews to break the Torah. And we're going to see that in chapters 1, 3, and 6. And second, these hostile Gentile nations are going to interrupt Israel's worship at the temple. And we see that in particular in chapters 8, 9, and 11. But first, how does Daniel's job in Babylon kind of put him in a bit of an awkward position? Let's jump back to chapter 1 of Daniel and kind of tease this out a little bit. So he was taken to Babylon, right? This youth without blemish. And he was, let's see, the purpose of bringing these youths to Babylon was to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans, and to give them a daily portion of the king's food and of his wine, to be educated in the ways of Babylon so they can stand before the king. I mean, it seems as if what Nebuchadnezzar is trying to do is to rewrite the worldview of these young Hebrews, indoctrinate them in the ways of Babylon. And for Daniel in particular, the food issue was particularly troubling. Now, this could be because of a potential violation of the dietary laws in Leviticus 11, or maybe this food was offered to the Babylonian gods and then consumed. We don't know exactly, but the point is that Daniel was faithful while in exile, when he was tempted to compromise and break the Torah. He was faithful. And this chapter teaches as well that he was rewarded for his faithfulness. He was miraculously delivered. Remember, it says that Daniel and his companions were fatter in flesh after just eating vegetables and drinking water for 10 days. I mean, that seems like a bit of a miraculous intervention of God as well. And of course, they were given wisdom and learning and knowledge, which surpassed all of the other wise men in Babylon. So God's hand was with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now we're going to see this same pattern, faithfulness in exile, expanded here in chapters 3 and 6. Now we know these stories pretty well. The fiery furnace and the lion's den, but I want you to check out some of the parallels between these chapters. All right, so here's some chiastic parallels in Daniel's chapter 2 through 7. But we're interested now in chapters 3 and 6, where these Jews who are taken to Babylon are being tempted. They're being tested. Are you going to break the Torah or not? So Nebuchadnezzar, he sets up this golden image, an idol, and he says, you better bow down to that image or else, or be killed. And of course, Cyrus signs a petition, signs on the dotted line saying that for these 30 days, if anyone prays to anyone, any being, any deity, except King Cyrus, well, then he'll be cast into a den of lions. If you do not break the Torah, you'll be cast into the furnace. You'll be cast into the den of lions. But then there's this heroic moment in each of these chapters where the Jews say, our God is able to save us, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow down to your image. Go Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then Daniel, this is great too. The very moment that the document was signed, what is the very first thing he did? He goes to his house, he gets down on his knees and he prays, right? And he prays to Yahweh, and he does so in front of an open window, no less. I mean, that sounds like courage to me. And that, of course, is the difficult lesson of these chapters, remaining faithful to Yahweh in face of potential persecution and death. But these chapters have more to say than just that. Not only was Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faithful to Yahweh, they were faithful to the very governments that were trying to kill them as well. Take a look at this from chapter 6, Daniel's faithfulness while serving in Babylon. So Daniel, I mean, he's set in charge over the whole place, isn't he? He was distinguished above all other high officials and satrap, and because an excellent spirit was in him. So the king planned to set Daniel over the whole kingdom because Daniel was faithful in his role. And when the other high officials who were jealous of Daniel, now we notice in both of these chapters, there's some kind of accuser, an accuser who was jealous of the faithful Jews in exile. And they try to find a ground for complaint against Daniel, but they can't, because Daniel was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. And he's going to say later the same thing to the king when he is pulled up out from the den of lions. He says that the lions have not harmed me because I was found blameless before God and also before you. I have been blameless before you, King Cyrus. I have done no harm. So how is Israel to live during the times of the Gentiles while in exile? They are to be faithful to Yahweh despite the cost, and they are to do good to their persecutors. But that's only half of the story here in these chapters. These chapters 3 and 6, they offer profound hope as well, because our buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, they were delivered. They were saved from this deadly persecution. Look at some of these parallel language that we see here in these chapters. After they were accused, when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the fire, they were not hurt. This is chaval. And Daniel says that the lions have not chaval, they have not harmed me. And that's because God sent an angel. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar looks into the fiery furnace and he's like, I thought that I threw 3 people in there, but I see a 4th. And the appearance of the 4th is like the sons of the gods. It seems to me that this was an angel that God sent to deliver Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the flames, and God sent an angel to shut the mouth of the lions. And the lesson here is not that, hey, if you're faithful to God, he will always protect you. No, but he is able to save. It seems like that is the emphasis here. Look at this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say that the God that we serve is able to deliver us. That is their confidence. And then Cyrus asks Daniel, has the living God whom you serve been able to deliver you from the lions? Well, yes, he is, because our God is able. The God that we pray to is able to save, and he will always remain faithful to us. So he is the one who decides what that faithfulness looks like, whether we perish in the flames or we're protected. Well, this faithfulness of the Jews in exile was on display before the most powerful person in the world, the king of Babylon and Persia. And this king, Nebuchadnezzar and Cyrus, they're in both chapters, they're going to make a decree. It says, I make a decree to all peoples, nations, and languages, a decree to all peoples, nations, and languages, that everyone in my empire should honor and glorify the God of the Jews, the God of Daniel and of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, this portrait of a Gentile king is the focus of chapters 4 and 5. And in chapter 4, our buddy King Neb, he's going to get turned into a beast. Here he is hanging out probably in his hanging gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and he's thinking, I'm so amazing. But look what happens next. All right, chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar is just looking out over his kingdom, and he says, is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power? God didn't give it to me. No, I did it. And I built it for the glory of my majesty. Whew, you better watch out. Speaking like that, King Neb. And of course, King Belshazzar, the last king of Babylon, he's going to make a mistake as well. He's going to throw a great feast with the temple vessels from Jerusalem and praise the gods of gold and silver. And the moment that happens, this vision is going to take place in both instances. Nebuchadnezzar has a vision earlier in the chapter of a great tree which is chopped down. And then a pronouncement is made that this person should be given the mind of a beast, and the mind of a man will be taken away from him. And of course, there's this mysterious language in Daniel chapter 5. And the language pretty much means, hey, buddy, you are done for. Well, let's return for a moment to King Neb. Why do you think that Nebuchadnezzar was turned into a beast? I mean, not literally, but he was given the mind of a beast. What is that meant to communicate? Well, recall for me the creation mandate in Genesis chapter 1, 26 to 28. What role are humans supposed to have in relation to animals? Remember what it says? That man is to have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves. Man is supposed to have dominion over the beasts. But what happens in Genesis 3? What was it that tempted Eve? Was it a person or was it an animal? You see, man is supposed to rule over the beasts, but in Genesis 3, a beast ruled over man and forced him to violate God's law. And the same thing is going to happen again in the next chapter, Genesis 4, with Cain and Abel. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Check this out. Genesis 4. We need to spend more time in Genesis. That's my opinion. So Cain and Abel, right? They both offer different sacrifices. Yahweh had regard for Abel's offering, but not so much for Cain. We don't really know why. But the point is, Cain got angry, his face fell, and Yahweh spoke to Cain, and he asked a question. He came very mercifully. Why are you angry? Don't you know that if you do well, you'll be accepted? But then he gets this warning. If you do not do well, sin is crouching at your door. And this verb, crouch, let's see, what is it? Ravatz. It is used primarily of animals. Animals are those who crouch. Think about a lion. Sin, like a lion, is crouching at your door. And this lion, sin, its desire is against you, but you must rule over it. You must rule over sin. You see, that's what Daniel is teaching, isn't it? That when we give into the beast, when we give into sin, then we become a beast. And we're going to see this again, of course, in chapter 7 with the vision and in chapter 8 as well. But is that the end of King Nebuchadnezzar's story? Are we left with him lying in the dirt as an animal? No. He is restored. The purpose of Nebuchadnezzar's humiliation is revelation. Look at this. Let's return to our chart. What is God revealing to Nebuchadnezzar? This is the purpose. To the end that. Why is this happening to you? Being given the mind of a beast. To the end. For the purpose that you would know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. Repeated 4 times in this chapter and once in the next chapter as well. God gives the kingdoms of the world to the lowliest men on earth. That is his purpose and his plan. So Nebuchadnezzar here in chapter 4 was made one of the lowliest men on earth. He was humbled, and it seems to me like we may see him in heaven one day. And the kingdom was restored to him. But on the other hand, chapter 5, Belshazzar, he was not humbled. He remained proud, and therefore the kingdom was taken from him. And that very night, he died, and the kingdom was transferred from Babylon to Persia. So these chapters, chapter 4 and 5, they are presenting for us 2 contrasting ways that the nations can respond to Yahweh, in humility or in pride and defiance. But they also are providing for us this portrait of the ideal Gentile king. A Gentile king who acknowledges the God of the Jews, acknowledges Yahweh's dominion over him and his kingdom, worships that king, worships Yahweh, and leads others into the worship of Yahweh. Remember that decree from chapters 3 and 6, leading all nations, peoples, and languages into the worship of Yahweh. Now, this is a portrait that is presented to us in the book of Daniel, and it will be the case after the second coming of Jesus for future kings during that period as well. Yes, I believe that there will be both ethnicity and nationality during both the millennium and the new earth. Come with me to Revelation 21, where we're going to see this on display. Revelation 21, where in the New Jerusalem we see no temple. We also have no need of a sun or moon, for the glory of God gives it light. Think about Isaiah 60 there. And by its light the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into the New Jerusalem. They will bring the glory and honor of the nations into the city. And of course, there's the tree of life there in the midst of the city, and its leaves are for the healing of the nations. Now, returning to Daniel, this positive portrayal of the nations, it's going to stop after chapter 6. And the remaining visions of this book are going to present the nations exclusively as being hostile to God and hostile to his people. A hostility which culminates in the Antichrist, a villain that we will consider next.